I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. 3 hours after my husband's funeral, my son threw away a piece of paper worth $3.2 million. I picked it out of the trash, and my life changed forever. My name is Nancy Cooper. I'm 70 years old, a retired English teacher, and as of 6 days ago, a widow. My husband Stephen died at 67 from stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The doctor said treatment might give him more time chemotherapy, radiation, maybe surgery. $200,000 to $300,000 they estimated. Stephen said no. At the time, I thought he was just tired, ready to let go. I didn't know the truth yet. I didn't know anything. The funeral was small. 23 people at East Lawn Memorial Park in Sacramento, including the minister and 2 cemetery workers who stood at a respectful distance. Stephen had outlived most of his friends, and the ones who remained were too frail to make the trip across town. My son Jacob stood beside me throughout the ceremony. 40 years old, tall like his father used to be, but carrying weight that comes from expense account dinners and hours spent sitting in cars between sales calls. He checked his phone twice during the eulogy. I told myself he was grieving in his own way. His wife Karen stood on his other side. 37, 10 years younger than Jacob, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that speaks of regular salon visits. Her designer handbag probably cost more than my monthly pension. She touched my arm once and said, "We're so sorry about Stephen." Her eyes were dry. Their daughter Lily, my granddaughter, wasn't there. 8 years old, supposedly at home with a babysitter. "Too young for funerals," Karen had said. I'd only seen Lily twice in the past year, both times for less than an hour. Stephen and I had been married for 46 years, together for 49. We met when I was 21 and he was 24, both of us students at Sacramento State. He was studying to be a librarian. I wanted to teach English literature. We got married 3 years later in a ceremony almost as small as his funeral. I thought I knew everything about him. The way he hummed while he cooked. How he organized our bookshelves by color instead of author, which used to drive me crazy. The small scar on his left hand from a kitchen accident in 1979. The way he always fell asleep before me, his breathing settling into that soft rhythm that had been the soundtrack of my nights for decades. I was wrong about knowing everything. So terribly wrong. Now we were back at the apartment on Capitol Avenue, the one Stephen and I had shared for 32 years on the second floor of a building that had seen better days. The elevator was broken again, so we'd climb the stairs. Jacob had complained about it being unsafe for someone your age, Mom. Boxes everywhere, black trash bags leaning against walls. The systematic dismantling of a life reduced to decisions about what stayed and what got donated to Goodwill. "We should probably talk about what you're going to do now," Jacob said. He was going through Stephen's desk, pulling out drawers with more force than necessary. "This place is too much for you to handle alone. Karen and I have been thinking there's a nice senior community in Roseville. Very affordable. You'd have people your own age around." "I'm not ready to think about that yet." I was folding Stephen's sweaters, each one holding his scent. Old Spice and the lavender soap I'd been buying for 30 years. "Mom," Jacob's voice had that edge of impatience he'd developed somewhere in his 30s. "You have to be practical. How are you going to manage the rent here? Dad's pension is gone. You're living on what your teacher's retirement. That's barely enough to—" "I'll manage." My hands tightened on a gray cardigan Stephen had worn so much the elbows were thin. Karen appeared from the bedroom, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Nancy, we're only trying to help. We know this is hard, but decisions need to be made. The lease is up in 60 days. 60 days. They'd already checked. Jacob found the stack of papers in the desk's bottom drawer. Old bills mostly. PG&E statements from 2 years ago. Credit card offers addressed to Stephen. A warranty card for a toaster we'd bought in 2019 and thrown out last summer. "This is all junk, Mom," he said, flipping through them quickly. Too quickly, I realized later, like he was looking for something specific. "We can toss it." But then something slipped out from between 2 electric bills. A single sheet of paper, cream-colored, heavier stock than the junk mail. It fell toward the floor and Jacob caught it before it landed. His hand shot out fast. I watched his face change. It only lasted a second, maybe 2, but I saw it. A flicker of something I couldn't identify. His jaw tightened. His hand closed around the paper hard enough that I heard it crumple slightly. His eyes went wide, then narrow, then carefully blank. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing." He said it too fast, already moving toward the kitchen. Just an old bank statement, expired account. Let me see. Mom, it's nothing. The paper hit the bottom of the trash can, that white plastic bin we kept next to the refrigerator. I heard it land on top of coffee grounds and a torn envelope from something I'd opened that morning. The account's probably closed anyway. Dad kept everything. You know how he was. He was at the trash can, now his body between me and it, blocking my view. We've got actual important stuff to deal with, Jacob continued, voice too loud, too casual. The lease on this place ends in 60 days. We still haven't sorted the medical bills, and the probate paperwork. Jacob. I stood up. Something in my voice made him stop. What was on that paper? I told you. Nothing. Old account statement. Worthless. But his hands were shaking. Just slightly. The way they'd shaken when he was 16 and I'd caught him sneaking back into the house at 3 in the morning. The way they'd shaken when he was 22 and Stephen had asked him about the $500 missing from his wallet. It's worthless, Jacob said again. Trust me. 10 minutes later, his phone rang. He stepped into the hallway to take the call, his voice dropping to a murmur I couldn't quite make out. When he came back, he was already reaching for his jacket. The expensive charcoal one Karen had bought him last Christmas. Karen needs me home, he said. Lily's got a thing at school Monday morning. Some project presentation. I need to help her prep. It was Saturday afternoon. The school thing was 2 days away. You're leaving? I looked around at the half-sorted bedroom, the boxes we hadn't even opened yet. We're not even halfway through. I'll come back next weekend. Promise. He was already at the door keys, jangling in his hand. Just don't throw away anything major without checking with me first. Okay, some of Dad's stuff might have value. Antiques, jewelry, whatever. We should go through it together. Then he was gone. I heard his footsteps echo down the exterior stairwell. Heard the distinctive electric hum of his Tesla starting up in the parking lot below. The sound faded down Capitol Avenue, and then there was just silence. I sat in that apartment for a long time after he left. The afternoon light came through the window in slanted gold bars that slowly turned orange, then purple, then deep blue. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat on the couch Stephen and I had bought at a yard sale in 1991, surrounded by boxes and trash bags, and the accumulated evidence of a life I'd thought I understood. Something about the way Jacob had moved bothered me. The speed of it, the certainty, and that look on his face when the paper had fallen, that split second of raw emotion before he'd locked it down behind the careful blankness he always wore when he was lying. I'd seen that look before. When he was 16 and told me he'd been studying at the library until midnight. When he was 22 and said he didn't know anything about Stephen's missing money. When he was 35 and explained why he couldn't visit his father in the hospital, too busy with work. Important client meetings couldn't be rescheduled. Nothing he'd said about the paper. Worthless, but his hands had been shaking. At 8 o'clock that evening, I finally stood up, turned on the kitchen light, walked over to the trash can. The paper was still there, resting on top of the coffee grounds and junk mail. One corner slightly crumpled where Jacob's hand had squeezed too hard. I pulled it out carefully, smoothed it on the counter under the fluorescent light. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a certificate of deposit from Wells Fargo dated April 12, 2017. Account number printed in small black type across the top. Current value listed in larger numbers at the bottom. $3,245,670. My hands went numb. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The numbers didn't change. $3.2 million. More money than Stephen and I had earned in our entire lives combined. More money than I'd thought existed in our world of monthly pension checks and arguing about whether we could afford to replace the water heater. And underneath the account number stuck to the certificate with a small yellow post-it note in Stephen's careful handwriting was a message that made the floor tilt underneath my feet, Nancy. They don't know about this one. Take this to Russell Jennings at Wells Fargo Midtown. Trust no one in the family. I love you. Trust no one in the family. Not be careful. Not ask questions first. Trust no one in the family. Including, I understood with a cold certainty that settled into my bones, our son. I read Stephen's note 17 times before I understood what he was really saying. 2 in the morning, and I sat at the kitchen table with the certificate spread out in front of me, that yellow post-it note glowing under the overhead light like a tiny flag of warning. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old pipes settling. Outside Capitol Avenue was empty. Even the bars had closed an hour ago. The certificate said April 12, 2017. 8 years ago. 8 years Stephen had kept this secret, and he'd never mentioned it. Not once. Not during dinner conversations about money. Not when we'd argued about whether we could afford to replace the water heater. Not during those long nights in his final months when pain kept him awake and we'd talk about everything and nothing just to pass the hours. $3,245,670. I kept reading the number like it might change if I looked away and looked back. But it stayed the same. More money than I'd earned in my entire career teaching American literature to teenagers who'd rather be anywhere else. My mind kept circling back to 2017. That was the year Stephen started forgetting things. Small things at first, where he'd left his car keys, whether he'd already taken his morning vitamins, the name of the neighbor in 3B who'd lived there for a decade. I'd been worried, say. Made him an appointment with Dr. Dixon, our family physician. Dr. Dixon had run tests, asked questions, looked concerned in that professional way doctors have when they're preparing you for bad news. Early signs of cognitive decline, he'd said. Not unusual for his age. We'll monitor it. But now I wondered, had Stephen really been forgetting, or had he been pretending 2017 was also the year Jacob moved back to California from Nevada? He'd been living in Las Vegas working for some medical supply company that went under, or that's what he'd told us. He'd shown up at our door in June with 2 suitcases and a story about wanting to be closer to family, about Karen being pregnant with Lily, about wanting his daughter to grow up near her grandparents. I want to help take care of you guys, he'd said. You're not getting any younger. I was 63. Stephen was 60. We weren't exactly decrepit, but Jacob had insisted. Moved into a house in El Dorado Hills close enough to visit regularly. At first, he had visited regularly twice a week, sometimes more. He'd take Stephen to doctor's appointments, help with grocery shopping, sit with him while I was still teaching those last few years before retirement. We'd been grateful. What parent wouldn't be? Your son wanting to take care of you. Now that gratitude tasted like ash in my mouth, Stephen had refused cancer treatment. That was 2024, just this past January, when Dr. Dixon had delivered the diagnosis. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Operable possibly, but the surgery was risky. Chemotherapy would be brutal. The whole course of treatment would cost somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000, even with Medicare. I'm not doing it, Stephen had said. We were sitting in Dr. Dixon's office, the walls covered with diplomas, and those motivational posters about perseverance that always seemed more depressing than inspiring. I'm 67 years old, Nancy. I've had a good life. I'm not spending our last savings on maybe buying myself 6 more months of misery. I'd argued. God, I'd argued. But Stephen was stubborn when he made up his mind, and eventually I'd stopped fighting. I thought he was just tired, ready to accept the inevitable. But he'd had $3 million hidden away. $3 million that could have paid for treatment 10 times over. And he'd chosen to die instead. Why? The answer was in my hand. That post-it note in Stephen's careful script. Take this to Russell Jennings at Wells Fargo Midtown. Trust no one in the family. He'd been protecting something. Or protecting someone. Or maybe just protecting the truth, making sure it survived even if he didn't. The certificate felt heavy in my hands. Heavier than paper should feel. This wasn't just money. This was evidence of something I didn't know yet. Something Stephen had hidden. Something he'd left me instructions to find. Something he'd warned me about. Trust no one in the family. Not trust Jacob. My son who'd thrown this certificate in the trash without a second thought. Or maybe with every thought. Maybe that's why his hands had been shaking. I looked at the clock. 2:43 in the morning. The bank wouldn't open for almost 7 hours. Monday morning I'd take this to Wells Fargo Midtown. I'd find Russell Jennings, whoever he was, and I'd start getting answers to questions I hadn't even known I needed to ask. But first I needed to hide it. Jacob had found it once in Stephen's desk. If he came back when he came back, he'd look for it. I was certain of that now. The way he'd rushed off. The way he'd told me not to throw anything away without checking with him first. He was planning to come back and search more thoroughly. I stood up, certificate in hand, and looked around the apartment. Where do you hide something this important, this dangerous? Then I saw it. Stephen's bookshelf. The one organized by color blue spines, bleeding into green, bleeding into yellow. He had hundreds of books accumulated over decades of being a school librarian. And there on the third shelf, wedged between two thick encyclopedias, was a worn copy of Moby Dick that we'd owned since 1976. I pulled it down. The pages were yellowed, the binding cracked. Stephen had read it twice, made notes in the margins in pencil. I opened it to the middle where the pages were thickest and carefully slid the certificate between pages 400 and 401, right in the middle of Ahab's final confrontation with the whale. Ironic, maybe. A story about obsession and revenge. About a man who destroyed himself chasing something he couldn't let go. I put the book back on the shelf, stepped back. It looked completely ordinary, just another old novel in a collection of old novels. Jacob wouldn't look there. Why would he? Jacob had never been much of a reader. I was about to turn off the kitchen light and try to sleep when I heard it. Footsteps on the exterior stairwell. Heavy, deliberate, coming up to the second floor. I glanced at the clock. 2:58 in the morning. The footsteps stopped outside my door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the light still on, staring at the door, waiting for a knock that didn't come. Silence. Then the footsteps again, moving away. Down the stairs. A car door opening and closing in the parking lot. An engine starting. I rushed to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. In the amber glow of the streetlight, I saw a silver sedan pulling away. Not Jacob's Tesla. Someone else's car. But I couldn't see the driver. It took me an hour to stop shaking. Sunday morning light was streaming through my kitchen window when the doorbell rang. Jacob stood in the hallway. And beside him, Karen. I knew immediately they'd come for the paper I'd pulled from the trash. I hadn't slept. The doorbell at 3 in the morning had turned out to be my neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez with car trouble. But after that, I'd spent the rest of the night watching the bookshelf, where I'd hidden the certificate, half expecting Jacob to somehow materialize in my living room. By the time real morning came, I'd drunk 4 cups of coffee and felt like my nerves were made of live wire. Now here was Jacob 12 hours earlier than he'd promised, and he'd brought Karen. "Hey, Mom," he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Thought I'd come back and help you finish up Dad's stuff. Didn't feel right leaving you to do it alone." Karen stood beside him. Only the second time I'd seen her up close since the funeral. 37 carefully put together in designer jeans and an expensive leather jacket. A handbag that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Nancy," she said, touching my arm. "We're so sorry about Stephen." I stepped back to let them in, watching Jacob's eyes sweep the apartment. The trash can first, then the kitchen counter, then the desk. Did you take the trash out yet?" Jacob asked, voice trying for casual and missing by a mile. "I forgot to do it yesterday." "Yeah," the lie came easily. "Building maintenance came by around 7 this morning. The building didn't have Sunday collection, but Jacob wouldn't know that." I watched him process this information, watched the brief flash of panic cross his face before he glanced at Karen. Something passed between them, some silent communication that made my skin crawl. "Oh, good." Jacob opened a desk drawer he'd already been through yesterday. "Less to worry about." Karen stepped forward, smile brightening. "Nancy, Jacob mentioned there might be old bank documents we should look at. For probate." "I'll handle probate with Stephen's attorney," I said. "You have an attorney?" Jacob asked too quickly. "Since when?" "Since 1992, Clarence Peaton, Old Sacramento." The name made Jacob's jaw tighten. What followed were 2 of the longest hours of my life. Jacob and Karen went through the apartment with a thoroughness that would have been touching if I didn't know what they were really doing. They checked closets, emptied drawers, sorted through boxes, always casual, always under the guise of helping. Karen took the bedroom. I heard her opening the nightstands, the dresser, even trying combinations on the small safe where we kept important documents. Jacob focused on the living room and kitchen. He went through the desk 3 more times each search, more frustrated than the last. At one point, he stood in front of Stephen's bookshelf, and my breath stopped completely. "Dad had a lot of books," he said, reaching for a thick blue volume. "He was a librarian for 34 years. I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "What did you expect?" He pulled out an encyclopedia about birds, flipped through it, found nothing, shoved it back. Not Moby Dick. Thank God, not Moby Dick. "Where's Lily?" I asked, desperate to break the tension. "With a babysitter," Karen said, emerging from the bedroom empty-handed. "We didn't think it was appropriate to bring her." All this sorting through. She trailed off as if the words dead grandfather's things were too vulgar to speak aloud. I'd like to see her sometime. Sure, Jacob said vaguely. We'll set something up. They left at 2 in the afternoon, empty-handed and visibly tense. I walked them to the door, accepted Karen's air kiss, watched them descend the stairs to the parking lot. Then I went to the window. From the second floor, I had a clear view of the parking lot. Jacob and Karen reached his Tesla but didn't get in. They stood beside it, and even from this distance I could see the argument building. Karen's hands moved sharply, punctuating words I couldn't hear. She pointed back at the building face, tight with anger. Jacob shook his head, hands spread in helplessness. Karen grabbed his arm, pulled him close, said something that made his whole body go rigid. He pulled away, ran his hands through his hair, looked up at the building like he was calculating something. For a second, I thought he was looking directly at my window, and I stepped back into the shadows. Finally, they got in the car, but they sat there for another 5 minutes, Karen talking Jacob, listening with his head bowed like a child being scolded. Then the Tesla's motor engaged with its distinctive electric hum, and they pulled away. I stayed at the window long after they'd disappeared down Capitol Avenue. My hands were shaking. They were desperate. That much was clear. Desperate enough to come back less than 24 hours after leaving. Desperate enough to search my home under the pretense of helping. Desperate enough to argue about it in public. They were looking for something specific. The certificate. They knew it existed. They needed it gone, which meant Stephen had been right. Trust no one in the family. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled out Moby Dick. The certificate was still there, pressed between pages 400 and 401, safe and waiting. Tomorrow morning, I'd take it to Wells Fargo Midtown. I'd find Russell Jennings and I'd start learning the truth my husband had died protecting. But first, I needed to understand why Jacob was so desperate, why Karen had come with him, why they'd searched with such methodical intensity. The answer sat in my hand. $3,245,670. Money Stephen had hidden for 8 years. Money he'd never told me about even when we'd argued about affording his cancer treatment. He'd let himself die rather than touch this money, rather than let Jacob know it existed. Monday morning, 9 o'clock sharp, I stood across the street from Wells Fargo Midtown watching the lights flip on inside. The bank sat on the corner of 21st and J Street, a newer building with too much glass and not enough character. The kind of place that could have been anywhere in America. I'd walked past it 1,000 times in 32 years and never once gone inside. Stephen had handled our banking. Now I understood why. The certificate was in my purse, wrapped in a plastic folder I'd found in Stephen's desk. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jacob's face when that paper had fallen. That flash of panic before the careful blankness. The morning was cold for April in Sacramento. I pulled my cardigan tighter, one of Stephen's old ones that still smelled like him, and crossed the street. The lobby was empty except for one teller counting cash at her station and a security guard who nodded at me as I entered. The air smelled like coffee and printer toner and that particular scent of money that banks have. I approached the teller. Her name tag said Sandra. "Good morning. I need to speak with Russell Jennings, please." "Do you have an appointment?" Sandra's smile was professional but distant. "No, but tell him it's about Stephen Cooper. He'll want to see me." Something flickered across Sandra's face. Recognition, maybe, or concern. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then gestured toward a hallway. Second door on the right. Russell Jennings was 52 years old, I'd later learn. Silver hair cut military short. The kind of posture that suggested he'd spent time in uniform before banking. He stood when I entered his office, hand extended. "Mrs. Cooper?" His eyes went to the certificate in my hand before they even reached my face. "I've been expecting someone," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure if your husband had told anyone." He closed the door behind me, locked it, pulled the blinds on the interior window that looked out onto the lobby. The whole sequence took maybe 10 seconds, and by the end of it my heart was hammering. "You know about this," I said, not a question. "I do." Russell gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please sit down. This is going to take a while." I sat, handed him the certificate, watched his hands steady as he examined it, fingers tracing the account number like he'd memorized it years ago. "April 12, 2017, he said quietly. Your husband came in on a Wednesday afternoon. He had 2 cashier's checks, total of $2 million. Said he wanted to open a certificate of deposit. Highest interest rate available. Longest term we offered. $2 million? My voice cracked. Where did he get $2 million? Property sales. Russell pulled up records on his computer fingers, moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. He liquidated 2 investment properties. A rental duplex he'd inherited from his mother back in 1998, and a small commercial building in Folsom he'd purchased during the dot-com era. Both sales went through quietly. He handled everything through a real estate attorney in Roseville. Kept the transactions completely separate from your joint accounts. Properties I'd forgotten existed. The duplex had been in Stephen's mother's name so long it had faded from memory. The Folsom building I'd thought he'd sold that years ago. The initial deposit was $2 million, Russell continued. With compound interest over 8 years at our highest CD rate, the current value is $3,245,670, as of this morning. The number hit me again, even though I'd already seen it. $3.2 million. More money than Stephen and I had accumulated in our entire lives combined. Mrs. Cooper, Russell's voice dropped lower. There's something else you need to know. He clicked through screens, pulling up scanned documents. In March of 2020, someone tried to access this account. 3 separate attempts over a 2-week period. My hands gripped the armrests of the chair. March 9th, 14th, and 20th. Each time they submitted power of attorney paperwork claiming your husband was mentally incapacitated and unable to manage his own affairs. The documents were professionally done, notarized, properly formatted, but our document verification specialist flagged them. Why? The signatures were wrong. Russell turned his monitor toward me. 3 identical forms filled the screen, each bearing Stephen's name, each claiming he needed someone else to manage his finances, each with a signature that looked like his, but wasn't. Not obviously forged, Russell explained, but wrong. The pressure was too consistent, suggesting someone had traced rather than signed naturally. The pen type didn't match what your husband typically used, and when we called the notary whose seal appeared on the documents, he had no record of notarizing anything for Stephen Cooper. I stared at the forms on the screen. My chest felt tight. Who submitted them? I asked, though I already knew. My hands were ice cold. Russell clicked another button. A name appeared at the top of the first form listed as the designated agent with power of attorney. My son's name, his address in El Dorado Hills, his phone number, his signature at the bottom swearing under penalty of perjury that the information was true and correct. The first attempt was denied immediately, Russell said. Your husband had warned us this might happen. When we rejected it, the same person tried 2 more times with slightly different paperwork, probably hoping a different teller wouldn't notice. But we'd flagged the account. Every attempt was documented, reported to our fraud prevention team. Did you call Stephen? Every time. Russell looked uncomfortable. He thanked me, said he was handling it, asked me not to involve law enforcement yet. Yet, he said. Russell paused, choosing words carefully. He said he needed to gather more evidence first, that moving too quickly would compromise something larger he was working on. The office felt smaller suddenly, the walls too close. I could hear my own breathing, harsh and uneven. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Why didn't Stephen tell me? I don't know why he didn't tell you, Mrs. Cooper, but he made me promise not to contact you unless something happened to him. He said if he died and someone came asking about the CD, I should tell them everything. Russell pulled a sealed envelope from his desk drawer, my name written on the front in Stephen's handwriting. He left this for you, said to give it to you if you ever came here. I stared at the envelope, couldn't make myself reach for it yet. Mrs. Cooper, Russell's voice was gentle but firm. I think we need to call the police. What your son attempted 3 times, that's felony forgery. Elder financial abuse. The fact that your husband hid $2 million and then died without using it for his cancer treatment. He stopped, started again. I think there's more to this than attempted access to a bank account. I finally looked away from the envelope, looked at the screen showing Jacob's signature on those forged documents. My son swearing under oath that his father couldn't manage his own affairs, trying 3 times to steal from him. Yes, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Call the police. Detective George Campbell arrived 45 minutes later. He was 48 years old, built solid like someone who'd played college football and never quite stopped training. The kind of eyes that missed nothing. When Russell introduced us in the conference room at the back of the bank, Campbell's handshake was firm, and his expression was kind, but there was steel underneath. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, "I've been waiting for you." "What, He set a briefcase on the table, opened it, pulled out a thick accordion folder with Stephen's name written on the tab in black marker. "Your husband contacted me August 15th, 2023. Walked into my office at the Sacramento Financial Crimes Division without an appointment. Sat down and said, 'I'm being robbed by my son and I'm dying of cancer. I need you to wait until I'm dead to do anything about it.'" The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. Campbell's voice was steady professional, but underneath it I heard something like respect. "He gave me this." He tapped the folder. 8 years of bank statements, copies of the forged power of attorney documents, a timeline of every theft, every lie, every manipulation. He'd been collecting evidence since 2017. "Why didn't he just turn Jacob in then?" I whispered. "Why wait? Why let him keep stealing?" Campbell's expression was grim. "He told me Jacob would lie, would claim your husband had given him permission, would say Stephen was confused because of dementia. He said people believe sons over fathers, especially when the father is old and sick. So he spent years building a case that couldn't be denied." He pulled out a document. Formal complaint typed and notarized. Stephen's signature at the bottom. "He filed this with my division last August, but he included specific instructions." Campbell met my eyes. "Do not act until after my death. Do not contact my wife until she discovers the certificate of deposit. Wait for her to bring it to Russell Jennings. Only then open the investigation." He knew I'd find it. He was counting on it. He told me you were the most honest person he'd ever known, that you'd do the right thing even if it destroyed you. Campbell's voice softened. He also said if Jacob found out he was aware of the theft, your son would move the money offshore. Destroy evidence. Maybe even... He stopped. He was afraid of him, Mrs. Cooper. Not physically, but he believed Jacob was capable of anything if cornered. That's why he pretended to have dementia, to make himself seem harmless, not worth worrying about. I thought of Stephen those last few years, playing confused, playing weak, while all along he was gathering evidence like a prosecutor building a case. "We've been monitoring your son's accounts since April 1st, Campbell continued, the day after your husband died, and we've already found activity that concerns us." He pulled out a printout, highlighted sections jumping out. April 2nd, one day after Stephen passed away, Jacob transferred $47,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. One day, Jacob had waited 1 day after his father died before moving money out of the country. "That's obstruction of justice and money laundering on top of the elder abuse charges," Campbell said. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "Mrs. Cooper, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." Campbell's eyes held mine. "Did you know any of this? Were you aware your son was stealing from your husband?" The question felt like an accusation, even though his tone was neutral. "No." My voice came out raw. "I thought Stephen had dementia. I thought we were broke. I thought the cancer treatment was too expensive, that we couldn't afford it." "He protected you," Campbell said quietly. "That's what he told me he was doing. He said if you knew you'd try to fix it, try to confront Jacob, try to get the money back, try to forgive him because he's your son. He said you'd sacrifice the evidence for family peace." He was right. Stephen had been right. If he'd told me 3 years ago that Jacob was stealing, I would have sat him down, talked to him, probably believed whatever excuse he gave me. "Your husband also mentioned something else." Campbell's voice was careful now. He said he was refusing cancer treatment, that the money he'd saved, the $2 million in the certificate, could have paid for treatment 10 times over, but he chose to die instead. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Because he said if he drained the CD for treatment, there'd be nothing left to prove what Jacob had done. The money wasn't for him anymore. It was evidence. It was justice." Campbell closed the folder. "Your husband chose death over letting your son get away with it." The conference room felt airless. I couldn't look at either of them. Russell's voice broke the silence. "Mrs. Cooper, your husband came here 4 times, between 2020 and 2023. Each time he requested printed statements of all his accounts. He told me it was for tax purposes. I think now he was building a case, documenting everything. He pulled paper files from a drawer, bank statements going back years, each one marked with Stephen's initials in the corner. She knew, I said quietly. He knew Jacob was stealing, and he documented it all. More than that. Campbell's expression was grim. He planned for it. The certificate of deposit, the separate properties he sold, the warnings he gave Russell. Your husband spent years preparing for something. For this moment, maybe. For you sitting here learning the truth. My throat felt tight. Why didn't he just tell me? Why go through all this alone? He was protecting you, Russell said again. He said if you knew, you'd try to intervene, try to talk to Jacob, try to fix the relationship, try to get him help. He said you believed in redemption, in second chances, and he loved that about you, but he also knew it would compromise the evidence. So he suffered alone. Not entirely alone, Campbell said. He had Russell. He had me once he contacted me, but yes, he carried most of this burden himself because he believed justice mattered more than comfort. Campbell reached into the briefcase one more time, pulled out something else. There's one more thing you need to see. It was a leather-bound notebook. Simple, the kind you could buy at any bookstore. But the pages were filled with Stephen's handwriting, dated entries, hundreds of them. Your husband's personal journal, Campbell said. 2017 through 2024, 7 years of entries. He wrote in it almost every day. He held it out to me. This isn't evidence. It's too personal for that. It's his voice, his thoughts, the parts he couldn't tell anyone else. You should read it tonight, Mrs. Cooper, alone. It will help you understand what he sacrificed. Not just his life, his dignity, his final years, everything. My hands shook as I took it. The leather was worn soft at the corners, the pages thick with ink. Mrs. Cooper, Campbell stood. We need to move quickly. Your son is asking questions. He knows someone's here, knows something's happening. Within the week, I'll have enough evidence for arrest warrants, but I need you to understand what that means. Arrest warrants. For multiple felonies, elder financial abuse, forgery, money laundering, conspiracy. Your son is looking at serious prison time, 10 years, maybe more. Campbell's eyes held mine. And I need to know right now, are you going to protect your son, or are you going to honor your husband's wishes? I looked down at my hands. At the yellow Post-it note I'd been carrying since Saturday night, Stephen's handwriting fading at the creases. Trust no one in the family. He'd known I'd have to make this choice, known it would break me. When do we talk to the attorney? I asked. Campbell nodded slowly. Something like respect crossed his face. This afternoon. His name is Clarence Peaton, Old Sacramento. Your husband met with him 6 times over the last 7 years. He has documents you need to see. Clarence Peaton's law office was in Old Sacramento 3rd floor of a brick building that had been standing since the gold rush. When he opened the door to greet me, I saw Stephen's eyes looking back, the same sharp intelligence, the same quiet determination. Nancy, he said, I've been expecting you. Stephen said you'd come. The office smelled like old paper and furniture polish. Law books lined every wall, floor to ceiling. Clarence himself was 73, white-haired and slight, wearing a cardigan that had gone out of style in the 90s. But his handshake was firm, and his eyes, Stephen's eyes, missed nothing. You knew, I said. All this time you knew. I did. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Sit, please. We have a great deal to discuss. Detective Campbell had come with me, standing now by the window overlooking 2nd Street. Clarence nodded to him like they'd met before. Detective, Stephen spoke highly of you, said you were one of the few who actually listened to victims. She made it easy, Campbell replied. Most thorough documentation I've ever seen. Clarence moved to a wall of filing cabinets and pulled out a storage box, the kind lawyers use for case files. Heavy cardboard with a lid. Someone had labeled it in black marker, Cooper case, to be opened only after my death. Stephen's handwriting, precise, unshakable. Your husband came to me in November 2017, Clarence said, setting the box on his desk. Walked into this office and said, I need to document something quietly, something that's going to take years to prove. I've known Stephen since 1982. We met in a constitutional law class at Sacramento State. He was the smartest person in the room always. So when he asked for help, I didn't question him. He opened the box, Inside were manila folders neatly organized, each one labeled with dates and categories: bank statements, receipts, correspondence, a small USB drive in a plastic case, and at the bottom, a leather-bound notebook. He came here 6 times over the last 7 years, Clarence continued. Each visit he'd add more evidence: bank statements showing withdrawals he hadn't authorized, receipts for purchases he'd never made, text messages he'd somehow managed to retrieve from Jacob's phone. "How did he get Jacob's text messages?" I asked. Clarence smiled thinly. "Your husband was a librarian. He understood information systems better than most IT professionals. He also understood people. When Jacob added him to his phone plan in 2018, supposedly to save money, Stephen gained access to the account management portal. From there, he could see every text, every call log. He documented all of it." He handed me one of the folders. Inside were screenshots printed out and dated. Text exchanges between Jacob and Karen. Between Jacob and someone named David Bradford. The messages made my stomach turn. "Dad's account's looking thin. Might be time to find the other one. He doesn't remember anything anymore anyway. Won't even notice." I closed the folder before I could read more. "The last time I saw Stephen was March 26th of this year," Clarence said quietly. 10 days before he died. He was so thin I barely recognized him. But he walked in here under his own power, sat in that chair you're sitting in now and dictated a sworn statement. We recorded it, had it notarized, sealed it with instructions that it not be opened until after his death and after you discovered the certificate." "A video?" Campbell asked, leaning forward. "Audio and video, 37 minutes of testimony. Stephen explaining every theft, every manipulation, every moment he pretended to be confused so Jacob wouldn't realize he was building a case." Clarence's voice wavered. "He knew he was dying, knew he had maybe weeks left, and he spent those weeks making sure the evidence was perfect." The USB drive sat in its plastic case, innocuous and terrible. "That drive contains everything," Clarence said. "Scanned copies of the forged power of attorney documents, email exchanges between Jacob and Karen discussing how to access the CD phone records proving coordination. If you're going to prosecute Detective, this is your smoking gun." Campbell picked up the drive carefully, like it was evidence at a crime scene, which I supposed it was. "Mr. Peaton, this is exactly what we need. With this and the complaint Mrs. Cooper's husband filed with my office, we can move forward immediately." "That was Stephen's intention," Clarence said. "He told me I won't be alive to testify, but the evidence will speak for itself. He was very clear about that." I looked at the box, at the folders full of Stephen's careful documentation, at the years of work he'd done in secret. "Why didn't he tell me?" The question came out raw. Clarence sat down heavily in his chair. "He was protecting you, Nancy. He said if you knew, you'd try to intervene, try to talk to Jacob, try to fix the relationship, try to get him help. He said you believed in redemption, in second chances, and he loved that about you. But he also knew it would compromise the evidence, so he suffered alone. Not entirely alone." Campbell's voice was quiet. "He had you. He had me. But yes," Clarence said, "he carried most of this burden himself because he believed justice mattered more than comfort." Clarence reached into the box one more time, pulled out the other leather-bound notebook. "There's one more thing. Stephen's personal journal, 2017 through 2024, 7 years of entries. He wrote in it almost every day. You should read it tonight, Nancy. Alone. It's not evidence, it's too personal for that. But it's his voice, his thoughts, the parts he couldn't tell anyone else." He held it out to me. The leather was worn soft at the corners, the pages thick with ink. "Stephen was the bravest person I ever knew," Clarence said, and his voice finally broke. "And the loneliest. He documented every theft, yes, but he also documented why he stayed silent, why he let them think he was losing his mind, why he chose this path. Read it, Nancy. Understand what he sacrificed, not just his life, his dignity, his final years, everything." I opened the leather cover at 10 o'clock that Tuesday night, expecting financial records. What I found was my husband's voice page after page of careful observations, dates, dollar amounts, and a truth that made my chest tighten with grief and rage. The apartment was dark except for the kitchen light. I'd made coffee I didn't drink. Now it was just me and Stephen's words, and I was terrified of what I'd find. The first entry was dated November 12, 2017. Nancy thinks I'm losing my mind. I heard her on the phone with Dr. Dixon today asking about memory clinics. I wanted to tell her the truth, but I can't. Not yet. If Jacob knows I'm documenting this, he'll destroy the evidence. I have to let them think I'm helpless. I read it 4 times. The words didn't change. Stephen had been pretending from the very beginning. January 8, 2018, $22,000 withdrawn from joint checking. Jacob said it was for property taxes. I called the county assessor. Actual tax bill $8,400. Where did the other $13,600 go? April 14, 2018. Karen showed me hospital bills from UC Davis. $30,000 for Lily's emergency surgery. I called the hospital. No record of Lily being treated there. The documents were fake. Page after page of small thefts adding up to something monstrous. July 19, 2019 made my hands shake. Jacob brought Dr. Dixon today without warning. Said I've been having episodes. Had a list prepared for getting conversations leaving the stove on getting lost. All lies. But I played along. When Dixon asked what year it was, I said 1987. The look on Jacob's face relief mixed with satisfaction. He wanted me diagnosed. Stephen had deliberately failed cognitive tests, had pretended to forget his own address. It's easier than I thought becoming invisible. When you're a confused old man, people stop seeing you as a threat. They talk in front of you like you're not there. That's when you learn the truth. The entries from 2020 onward detailed his isolation. February 9th, 2021, Jacob changed my phone number without asking. Said it was to reduce spam calls. Now when old friends try to call, they get disconnected. I'm disappearing one person at a time. June 23rd, 2021. Karen convinced the building manager I'm not allowed visitors without family approval. Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B tried to visit with Soup yesterday. They turned her away. Every entry was dated. Every detail verified. Then, January 15th, 2024, the handwriting shakier. Dr. Dixon confirmed it today. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. He wants to start treatment immediately. Cost $200,000 to $300,000. I told him no. I had to stop reading. Walked to the window. Stephen had refused treatment. Had come home and pretended everything was fine. The next entry explained why. Nancy will want to use our savings, but our savings are gone. Jacob took them years ago. The only money left is the certificate, and if I touch that, there's nothing left to prove what he did. The money isn't for me anymore. It's evidence. It's justice. He'd chosen to die. Consciously. Deliberately. The entries that followed were shorter, written in increasing pain. Stephen documented visits he went to alone, prescriptions he filled at pharmacies across town, so Jacob wouldn't know how sick he was. March 28th, 2024, 8 days before he died. 8 days left, maybe less. Dr. Dixon says I should be in hospice, but I can't go yet. Not until everything is ready. Not until I'm sure Nancy will find the certificate will see the truth. I have to make it to April. The final entry was April 1st, the day he died. Nancy is still asleep. I can hear her breathing. That soft sound that used to keep me awake and now makes me want to cry. I won't wake her. Let her have a few more hours before her world changes. I've left everything she needs. The certificate, the instructions to Russell and Clarence and Detective Campbell. I've built the case. All she has to do is finish it. I trust her. She's the best woman I've ever known, even if I had to lie to her at the end. Some betrayals are beyond forgiveness. Some truths are worth dying to protect. I love you, Nancy. Finish what I started. The page blurred. I was crying ugly, choking sobs I hadn't allowed since the funeral. Stephen had died that afternoon while I was at the grocery store. I thought it was peaceful, natural, but he'd waited, held on until everything was in place. Then he'd let go. I closed the notebook and sat in the dark for a long time. My husband had died alone in pain, protecting a secret that would destroy our son. He'd sacrificed everything, not just his money, but his dignity, his final year, his chance at treatment. Because he believed justice mattered more than comfort. Because he believed some betrayals were beyond forgiveness. The question was whether I had the courage to finish what he'd started. Outside, a car alarm went off, then stopped. The refrigerator hummed. Normal sounds in a world that would never be normal again. I picked up my phone, called Detective Campbell. Nearly midnight, but he'd said any time. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Cooper, I read the notebook, all of it. A pause. And he knew everything. He documented everything. He died protecting the evidence. I know, Campbell said quietly. He chose to die detective. Chose it. Because treating the cancer would have meant using the money, and using the money would have meant Jacob getting away with it. I know. What do we do now? Campbell's voice was firm. We finish what your husband started. Wednesday morning, Campbell called with the kind of controlled excitement investigators get when a case breaks wide open. We traced the money, he said. All of it. He arrived at my apartment 30 minutes later with a laptop and a file folder thick with bank records. Spread them across my kitchen table like a general planning a battle. Your son and daughter-in-law live in a $680,000 house in El Dorado Hills, Campbell began. Purchased in 2018. They drive 2 luxury vehicles, Tesla Model X and a BMW X5. Your granddaughter attends Sierra Ridge Academy, private school. Tuition running $42,000 a year. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. Add mortgage, car payments, property taxes, and general lifestyle expenses, and they're burning through at least $200,000 annually. The math was obvious even to me. Jacob's legitimate income from pharmaceutical sales, Campbell continued, $95,000 a year, maybe $100,000 in a good year with bonuses. He can't afford any of that. Exactly. So we dug deeper. Campbell clicked through screens. September 2018, Jacob registered a limited liability company called Garrett Holdings, filed in Delaware, which is a red flag. Delaware has loose reporting requirements, making it popular for shell companies. Shell company, a business that exists only on paper. No employees, no office, no products or services. Just a bank account for moving money around. Campbell pulled up incorporation documents. Garrett Holdings has received $847,000 in consulting fees between 2018 and 2024. The payments came from offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and British Virgin Islands, accounts we can't easily trace back to their source. He showed me the pattern. Money flowing into Garrett Holdings in chunks, $30,000 here, $50,000 there, always under the reporting threshold that would trigger automatic federal scrutiny. But we know where it really came from, Campbell said. Your son withdrew money from your husband's accounts, transferred it to these offshore accounts through a series of intermediary banks, then had it sent back to Garrett Holdings as legitimate-looking consulting income. Once it was in Garrett Holdings, he could move it to his personal accounts without raising suspicion. Money laundering. Textbook laundering. And here's the critical part. Campbell pulled out another document, a corporate filing with a familiar name at the bottom. Karen Cooper is listed as Garrett Holdings' Chief Financial Officer. She signed the incorporation documents. She manages the bank accounts. She structured the whole operation. I stared at Karen's signature. Confident, clear, professional. Your daughter-in-law isn't just complicit, Mrs. Cooper. She's the architect. Jacob's the one who stole from your husband, but Karen built the system that let him hide it. I thought of Karen standing in my apartment Sunday, smiling sympathetically, touching my arm. We're so sorry about Stephen. There's more, Campbell said. In March of 2023, Jacob withdrew $47,000 from one of the joint accounts with your husband. Told Stephen it was for a medical emergency. Said Lily needed emergency dental surgery. He paused. We tracked that money. Want to know where it went? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas. He gambled it away in 3 days. Blackjack and poker mostly. Lost every cent. So while Stephen was documenting his thefts, planning his case, dying of cancer, he couldn't afford to treat Jacob, was in Las Vegas burning through $47,000 at casino tables. We've got him 6 ways from Sunday, Campbell said. Elder financial abuse, forgery, money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy, and now we found someone who can testify about how the whole thing started. Who? Campbell pulled up a photo on his laptop. A man in his mid-30s, dark hair, tired eyes. David Bradford, former senior accounts manager at Wells Fargo Midtown, worked there for 8 years until he was fired in October 2020. My stomach dropped. He was in on it. Not exactly. He was manipulated by Karen. She targeted him specifically, started a relationship with him, asked questions about banking systems, exploited his access to customer accounts. When he finally realized what she was doing and refused to help, she threatened to report him for unauthorized account access. Wells Fargo fired him anyway. He's been blacklisted from banking ever since. Why would he testify? Because he wants Karen to pay for destroying his career, and because he has information about her background that changes everything. Campbell closed his laptop. Karen's maiden name is Palmer. Her father owned a commercial real estate company in Orange County that went bankrupt in 2015 amid fraud allegations. He's currently under federal investigation. David did some digging after Karen disappeared from his life. Found out she'd dated 3 other men in finance between 2014 and 2019. All of them lost money or access or both. She has a pattern. She identifies targets, I said slowly, builds relationships, exploits them for information or access, then moves on. Exactly. Your son isn't her first victim. He's just the most profitable one. Campbell stood gathering his papers. I've arranged for you to meet David tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock Tower Cafe downtown. He wants to tell you directly what Karen did to him, how she operates, and he's willing to testify in court about all of it. Will that be enough to arrest them? Campbell's expression was grim. Between David's testimony, your husband's documentation, the financial records, and the money laundering evidence, we'll have arrest warrants by Monday. Maybe sooner. Your son and daughter-in-law are looking at serious federal prison time. He paused at the door. Mrs. Cooper, I know this isn't easy, but your husband spent 8 years building this case. He documented every theft, every lie, every manipulation. He died protecting the evidence. The least we can do is use it. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the papers he'd left behind. Spreadsheets showing money flowing through shell companies and offshore accounts. Corporate documents with Karen's signature. Photos of the house in El Dorado Hills, the luxury cars, the private school. All of it paid for with money stolen from Stephen. Money he could have used to save his own life. I picked up my phone. There was a message I'd been avoiding since yesterday. From Jacob. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's important. Call me. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock. Tower Cafe on Broadway. A Sacramento landmark with mismatched furniture and walls covered in local art. The kind of place that felt lived in, comfortable, real. David Bradford was already there when I arrived. Corner table staring at nothing. 35 years old, wearing a cheap suit that hung loose on his frame. His hands were wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only solid thing left in his life. Detective Campbell and I approached together. David looked up, red-rimmed eyes, shadows underneath. When he stood to shake my hand, his fingers were cold despite the coffee. Mrs. Cooper, he said, I'm the reason your son knew about the CD. I told Karen it existed. I'm sorry. We sat. David kept his hands wrapped around his cup knuckles white. I met Karen in October 2019, he began. His voice was flat, reciting facts he'd memorized. Banking conference at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. She approached me at the networking reception. We talked for 3 hours. She asked intelligent questions about wealth management, estate planning. I thought she was genuinely interested. You started dating, I said. Yes. She never mentioned being married at first. When she told me about Jacob in December, she said they were separated, working through a divorce. Said her father-in-law was holding assets that should have been divided. His jaw tightened. I wanted to believe her. She was strategic. Never pushed too hard. Just casual questions. How do banks track large deposits? What triggers fraud alerts? I thought I was making conversation about my work. Campbell leaned forward. When did she ask about Stephen? March 4th, 2020. She called me at work, said she needed help, asked if I could look up an account for Stephen Cooper. Said her husband's father had severe dementia, couldn't remember his accounts, that the family needed access for medical expenses. The lie was smooth, practiced. How many times had Karen used it? I looked up the account, David said, looking at me directly now. Account number, balance, when it opened, $2,100,000. I told her everything. This was how Jacob had known. Through Karen, who'd cultivated a relationship with a bank employee specifically for this information. March 9th, Karen brought me power of attorney documents, David continued. Said they'd been notarized, but the bank kept rejecting them. Asked if I could manually bypass the verification system. Did you? Campbell's voice was careful. I started to, but something felt wrong, so I ran them through proper authentication protocols instead. He paused. They were flagged immediately. Forged signatures, wrong paper stock. When I called the notary whose seal was on the documents, He had no record of ever meeting Stephen Cooper. What happened when you confronted her? She denied everything. Then, when I said I was reporting it as fraud, she threatened me. Said she had text messages where I'd mentioned looking up the account, that I'd be fired for protocol violations. David's voice went bitter. I reported it anyway. Filed a fraud alert, flagged the account, documented everything. Wells Fargo investigated the forged POA, but they also investigated me. 6 months later, they fired me. Client confidentiality violation. Didn't matter that I'd refused to help, that I'd reported the fraud. I've been unemployed for 4 years, blacklisted from banking. And Karen disappeared, blocked my number, deleted her accounts. I tried to warn your son, left him a voicemail saying his wife had tried to use me to steal from his father. He never called back. Campbell pulled out his notebook. Tell her what you found about Karen's background. David reached for his phone, showed me screenshots. Her maiden name is Karen Lynn Palmer. Her father owned a commercial real estate company in Orange County, went bankrupt in 2015. He's under federal investigation for mortgage fraud. She learned from her father. He scrolled through more images. I found 3 other men she dated between 2014 and 2019. All worked in finance. I contacted them. Same pattern every time Karen dates them, asks strategic questions, tries to exploit their access, then disappears. Your son isn't her first victim, Campbell said to me. Just the most successful one. David put his phone away. I lost my career because I trusted her. But if there's a trial, I'll testify. I'll tell a jury exactly what she asked me to do, how she operates. He looked at me with defiance mixed with shame. Your husband lost his life. I lost my career. The least we can do is make sure they don't get away with it. Campbell closed his notebook. We have enough now. The forged POA documents, the systematic withdrawals, David's testimony, Stephen's notebook. I'm filing for arrest warrants tomorrow morning. He paused. Mrs. Cooper, when we execute those warrants, it's going to be fast. You need to prepare yourself. Your son and daughter-in-law will be in custody within 48 hours. And my granddaughter? I asked quietly. Campbell didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Lily was 8 years old, and her parents were about to be arrested for multiple felonies. What happens to her? Child Protective Services will be en route, Campbell said. She can't stay home alone with both parents in custody. She'll be placed in temporary foster care pending a custody hearing, unless there's family willing to take her. I looked around the cafe, at the mismatched chairs and local art and people living their normal lives. Everything felt surreal. Tell them I'm coming for Lily, I said. Tell them her grandmother is coming to get her. Thursday morning, April 24th, 6:45 in the morning. My phone rang with Detective Campbell's voice and the sound of car doors slamming in the background. It's happening now. 2 weeks had passed since our meeting with David Bradford. 2 weeks of Campbell building his case, gathering statements, coordinating with federal prosecutors. 2 weeks of me living in limbo, knowing what was coming, but not when. Now it was here. We're at the El Dorado Hills residence, Campbell said. Background noise, police radios, someone giving orders. 4 units. Your son just answered the door. I was sitting at my kitchen table. Had been since 5 that morning when Campbell texted me one word today. I'd made coffee. Hadn't drunk it. Just sat there waiting for this call, knowing it would come, dreading it anyway. Through the phone, I heard Campbell's voice, calm and official. Jacob Cooper, you're under arrest for elder financial abuse, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Then Jacob's voice, confused, rising in panic. What are you talking about? There's some mistake. No mistake, Mr. Cooper. We have documentation of $1,850,000 withdrawn from accounts belonging to your father between 2016 and 2024, along with 3 forged power of attorney attempts in 2020. A woman's voice in the background, Karen. Sharp, controlled even now. Don't say anything, Jacob. We need our lawyer. Campbell narrated for me in low tones. He's not resisting. White dress shirt, barefoot. Probably just woke up. Neighbor across the street is filming on her phone. I heard the metallic click of handcuffs. Miranda rights being read in that rhythmic cadence they have. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Jacob's voice again breaking now. Mom, did Mom know about this? Is this because of that certificate that money was supposed to be for the family? For all of us. Campbell cut him off. Save it for your attorney. Second unit just confirmed, Campbell said to me. Karen Cooper located at Serenity Day Spa on El Dorado Hills Boulevard. She drove there separately this morning. Smart. Or she thought she was smart. Splitting up so if one got arrested, the other could disappear. But Campbell had anticipated that. Radio chatter crackled through the phone. Suspect in custody, requesting lawyer, not cooperative. Karen's playing it cooler than your son, Campbell said. But we've got her dead to rights. David Bradford's testimony puts her as the architect of the whole thing. There was a pause. The background noise changed. Someone talking urgently. A child's voice. Campbell's tone shifted. Gentler. Mrs. Cooper, there's a child here, your granddaughter, 8 years old, asking where her daddy's going. My chest tightened. I'd only met Lily twice. Once at Stephen's funeral, once years before at a strained Christmas dinner. Jacob and Karen had kept her separate from us. Controlled access like they'd controlled everything else. What happens to her? My voice cracked. Child Protective Services is en route, Campbell said. She can't stay here alone with both parents in custody. She'll be placed in temporary foster care pending a custody hearing, unless there's family willing to take her. I looked around the apartment. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, living room filled with Stephen's books and that old piano neither of us had played in years. Not built for a child, but better than foster care. They're transporting your son to the van now, Campbell continued. Karen's en route from the spa. Both will be processed at Sacramento County Main Jail, booking fingerprints holding cells. Arraignments scheduled for tomorrow morning 9 a.m. Will they make bail? Campbell was quiet a moment. The judge will see the evidence. Elderly victim, substantial dollar amount, forged documents, clear flight risk given the planned nature of it all. I'd be surprised if bail's set under $500,000 for Jacob, $750 for Karen. I thought about the house in El Dorado Hills, probably mortgaged to the hilt, the cars, the lifestyle, all built on stolen money. They couldn't raise that kind of bail, not without selling everything, and that would take weeks. They'll stay in custody until trial, I said. Most likely. A voice in the background closer this time, a social worker, professional and kind. Lily, honey, come with me. We're going to take care of you. Everything's going to be okay. But it wasn't okay. A child's parents were being arrested for stealing from her grandfather. Nothing about that was okay. Mrs. Cooper, I need to go. CPS just arrived. Campbell's voice dropped lower. I heard him move away from the activity. But Nancy, your granddaughter needs family. And in 3 weeks, you're going to be sitting in a federal courtroom watching your son and daughter-in-law go on trial. He paused. The weight of what he wasn't saying hung between us. You need to decide what kind of justice you want, Campbell said quietly. And what kind of mercy. The line went silent except for muffled voices, car doors closing, an engine starting. Detective, I said, yes. Tell the social worker. Tell them I'm coming for Lily. Tell them her grandmother is coming to get her. A long pause. I'll tell them. But Mrs. Cooper, you understand what that means. Taking custody of your granddaughter while her parents are on trial. It's going to be complicated. Difficult. She's going to have questions you won't know how to answer. Stephen would have wanted me to protect her, I said. That's all the answer I need. Campbell's voice carried something like respect. All right, I'll make the arrangements. But Nancy, first time he'd used my first name. Your son is going to prison, probably for a long time. And when he finds out you're the one who gave us the evidence, who pushed for prosecution, who took his daughter. He didn't finish. I know, I said. 3 weeks later, Monday, May 15th, 9 in the morning, the Robert T. Matsui Federal Courthouse in downtown Sacramento. All dark wood and cold marble. The kind of space designed to make you feel the weight of justice. I sat in the 3rd row watching my son and daughter-in-law stand before Judge Eleanor Hartman to answer for what they'd done. 3 weeks of Lily living in my 1-bedroom apartment, sleeping on the pull-out couch, asking questions I couldn't answer. 3 weeks of Jacob's lawyer calling, leaving messages I deleted. 3 weeks of preparing for this moment. Judge Eleanor Hartman presided. 60-something gray hair pulled back severely wire-rimmed glasses that caught the light when she looked down at documents. She'd been a federal judge for 20 years, Campbell had told me. fair but unforgiving when it came to elder abuse cases. The United States versus Jacob Michael Cooper and Karen Lynn Cooper, she announced. The defendants are charged with 3 counts of elder financial abuse, 7 counts of forgery, 2 counts of money laundering, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. Jacob stood at the defense table in a suit I'd never seen before, probably borrowed from his attorney Maxwell Grant, who looked expensive and confident. Karen wore a conservative navy dress, hair pulled back, makeup understated. They'd coached her well. She looked like a concerned suburban mother, not a woman who'd orchestrated years of theft. Prosecutor James Whitman stood for his opening statement. Younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of intensity that suggested he took these cases personally. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "Stephen Cooper spent the final years of his life pretending to lose his mind while secretly documenting his son's crimes. He faked dementia. He deliberately failed cognitive tests. He let his family think he couldn't remember his own address, all while building an airtight case against them." He walked toward the jury box, making eye contact with each member. Why would a man do this? Why would he suffer such indignity, such isolation, such loneliness, because his son Jacob Cooper was stealing from him, systematically, ruthlessly, $1,850,000 over 8 years, and his wife Karen Cooper built the system that allowed him to hide it? Maxwell Grant objected. "Relevance inflammatory," Judge Hartman overruled. "You may continue, Mr. Whitman." "You will hear testimony," Whitman continued, "from the bank manager who flagged forged documents, from the detective who investigated the money laundering scheme, from a man whose career was destroyed when Karen Cooper manipulated him to gain access to her father-in-law's accounts. And you will hear in his own words from Stephen Cooper himself, a man who chose death over letting his son get away with it." Maxwell Grant stood for the defense. His strategy was predictable. Family misunderstanding, confused elderly man's son trying to help manage finances. "This is a tragedy of miscommunication," Grant said. "Jacob Cooper loved his father. When his father began showing signs of cognitive decline, he did what any caring son would do. He helped manage accounts, paid bills, made sure his father was taken care of. The prosecution will paint this as theft. We will show you it was love." I felt sick, hearing the lie wrapped in reasonable-sounding words. The prosecution calls Russell Jennings. Russell took the stand, was sworn in. He'd aged in the month since I'd first met him. More gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. Whitman established his credentials efficiently. 27 years in banking. Regional manager at Wells Fargo Midtown since 2010. "Mr. Jennings, do you recognize this document?" Whitman displayed the certificate of deposit on the courtroom screens. "I do. That's the CD Stephen Cooper opened April 12, 2017. Initial deposit $2 million. Current value $3,245,670. And did there come a time when someone attempted to access this account?" "Yes. March 2020. 3 separate attempts over 2 weeks. March 9th, 14th, and 20th. Each time using power of attorney documents claiming Mr. Cooper was mentally incapacitated and unable to manage his finances. The forged POA documents appeared on screen. Jacob's name at the top, his signature at the bottom, swearing under oath that Stephen couldn't manage his own affairs. What did you do when these documents were presented? I flagged them immediately. Mr. Cooper had warned me this might happen. He'd come to the bank in 2017 specifically to tell me that someone might try to steal from him and that I should deny any access requests and notify him directly. Murmurs through the courtroom. Judge Hartman's gavel came down once. Silence. "Mr. Cooper knew someone would try to steal from him," Whitman repeated for emphasis. "Did he say who? No, but he was very specific that no one, including family, should be able to access the account without his personal authorization." Grant's cross-examination was brief, ineffective. He tried to suggest Russell had misunderstood Stephen's instructions, that Stephen had been confused, but Russell held firm. Stephen had been sharp, clear, methodical, not confused at all. "The prosecution introduces Exhibit 12, Whitman said. Stephen Cooper's personal journal kept from November 2017 through April 2025. A court clerk held up the leather-bound notebook. My chest tightened, seeing it in someone else's hands. Whitman read selected entries aloud. Stephen's careful documentation of thefts, his description of faking cognitive tests, His observations about being isolated cut off from friends and family. The courtroom was silent except for his voice and Stephen's words. "It's easier than I thought becoming invisible," Whitman read. "When you're a confused old man, people stop seeing you as a threat. They talk in front of you like you're not there. That's when you learn the truth." I watched Jacob. His face had gone pale, hands gripping the edge of the defense table. He was shaking slightly, hearing his father's words, understanding for the first time that Stephen had known everything, had watched him steal while pretending not to notice. Karen sat perfectly still. No emotion, just cold calculation, already thinking 3 moves ahead. Whitman closed the journal and looked at the jury. "Over the next 3 days, you will hear from witnesses who were manipulated by Karen Cooper. You will hear from experts who will explain how these defendants systematically exploited an elderly cancer patient. And you will hear in his own words, recorded on video, from Stephen Cooper himself." He paused, letting that sink in. "The prosecution calls David Bradford." David took the stand at 9:15 Tuesday morning, and I watched Jacob's attorney realize in real time that his entire defense strategy had just collapsed. Whitman moved efficiently through preliminaries. David's former occupation, senior accounts manager at Wells Fargo Midtown, 8 years with the bank. Current occupation unemployed. Terminated from Wells Fargo in October 2020 for protocol violations. The jury leaned forward. This wasn't what they'd expected. "Mr. Bradford, how did you meet Karen Cooper?" Banking Industry Conference. Fairmont Hotel, San Francisco. October 19th, 2019. Saturday evening networking reception. "What was the nature of your interaction?" "We talked for approximately 3 hours. She asked questions about estate planning, asset protection, how banks handle accounts for elderly clients with cognitive decline." David's voice was steady, factual. "She said she worked in healthcare consulting." Whitman displayed text messages on the courtroom screens. David's phone records subpoenaed during discovery. "Mr. Bradford, can you read the message from Karen Cooper dated January 7th, 2020? David read aloud, "Question for you. If a family member has a CD but can't remember opening it, how would someone find out the account details? Asking for a friend dealing with a parent's dementia. Did you respond?" "Yes. I explained that family members could request information with proper documentation. Death certificate, power of attorney, or being listed as beneficiary." "Did that satisfy her?" "No. Over the next 2 months, she asked increasingly specific questions. What if the bank rejects a POA? How do signature verification systems work? Can account access be manually overridden?" The jury was taking notes now. I saw one woman shake her head slightly. "Mr. Bradford, did there come a time when Karen Cooper asked you directly about a specific account?" "March 4th, 2020. She called me at work, asked if I could look up an account for Stephen Cooper, said it was her husband's father, that Stephen had severe dementia, that the family desperately needed access for medical expenses. Did you comply?" David's voice dropped. "Yes. I looked up the account, confirmed it existed. Certificate of deposit balance approximately $2,100,000. I gave her the account number." The courtroom stirred. Judge Hartman tapped her gavel once. "What happened next?" "March 9th, Karen brought me power of attorney documents. Said they'd been notarized, but the bank kept rejecting them. Asked if I could manually approve the request." Whitman displayed the forged POA on screen, the same documents Russell had shown. "What did you do?" "I ran them through proper authentication protocols. The signatures were flagged immediately. Wrong pressure, wrong pen type, notary seal dimensions off by .003 millimeters. "And you informed Karen Cooper?" "Yes. I told her the documents were fraudulent. She became angry. Said I must have made a mistake. When I refused to override the system, she threatened to report me for unauthorized account access." "Did you report the fraud?" "Yes, immediately. Filed an internal fraud report. Flagged the account. Documented everything." "And the consequences?" David's voice went flat. "Wells Fargo terminated my employment 6 months later. I'd violated client confidentiality by disclosing account information without authorization. The fact that I'd ultimately refused to help didn't matter. I've been unable to find work in banking since." I watched Jacob sitting beside Maxwell Grant. His face was ashen, staring at David like he'd never seen him before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe Karen had kept David's secret, just another tool in her arsenal. Austin Reed stood for Karen's cross-examination. Mr. Bradford, isn't it true you were romantically involved with my client? Yes. And isn't it possible you're testifying now out of spite because she ended the relationship? David looked at Reed directly. She didn't end it. I did. When I realized she'd used me to commit fraud. And I'm testifying because an elderly man with cancer died while his son stole everything he had. If that makes me spiteful, so be it. Reed sat down. No further questions. The prosecution calls Amanda Wilson. A woman I didn't recognize approached the stand. Late 30s, professional, business suit, dark hair pulled back. She didn't look at Jacob as she took the oath. Ms. Wilson, what is your relationship to Jacob Cooper? I was married to him from June 2011 to March 2019. 8 years. This I hadn't known. Jacob's first marriage. Campbell had mentioned it during the investigation, but hearing it in court made it real. Ms. Wilson, during your marriage, did you maintain separate financial accounts? Yes, a savings account from before we married, approximately $62,000. What happened to that account? Amanda's voice was steady, practiced. Between July 2017 and December 2018, $47,000 was withdrawn without my knowledge or permission. I discovered it in January 2019 during divorce proceedings. Did you determine who made the withdrawals? Yes, my ex-husband. He'd accessed my online banking, transferred money to an account registered to AP Financial Consulting LLC. And who owned AP Financial Consulting? Karen Palmer, the woman he'd been having an affair with, his current wife. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hartman's gavel came down hard. Order Whitman displayed bank records. Ms. Wilson, can you confirm these transfer records? Yes, 17 transfers between July 2017 and December 2018, amounts ranging from $1,000 to $5,000. Did you press charges at the time? No, my attorney advised that criminal charges would complicate the divorce and cost more in legal fees than I'd recover. I just wanted out. Amanda looked at Jacob for the first time. Looking back now, I should have reported it. If I had, maybe Stephen Cooper would still be alive. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry I let him get away with it. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Whitman returned to his table gathering papers. Then he stopped, turned back to Judge Hartman. Your Honor, the prosecution has one final witness. We call Stephen Cooper. The courtroom went silent. Judge Hartman frowned. Counselor, the victim is deceased. Whitman nodded. Yes, Your Honor. But in March 2022, Mr. Cooper recorded a notarized sworn statement with his attorney anticipating exactly this situation. We request permission to present his testimony via video recording pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 804B. Maxwell Grant was on his feet. Objection hearsay. Exception for unavailable declarants with corroborating evidence, Your Honor, Whitman countered. Mr. Cooper is deceased. His statement was made under oath, notarized, and corroborated by physical evidence presented at trial. Judge Hartman considered. I'll allow it, but Mr. Whitman, this had better be relevant. It is, Your Honor. The lights dimmed. The screen at the front of the courtroom glowed to life. And then my husband appeared there, sitting in Clarence Peaton's office, looking straight at me across time and death. The date stamp in the corner read, March 15th, 2022, 3 years before he died. Stephen was thinner, then his cheekbones sharper, but his eyes were clear and steady. He looked directly into the camera with the same expression I'd seen 1,000 times when he was about to explain something difficult. My name is Stephen James Cooper. He began, his voice steady. I'm recording this sworn statement in the presence of Clarence Peaton, my attorney and notary public Patricia Wells. I am of sound mind and body. What I'm about to tell you is the truth. He paused, folded his hands on the desk. I've been diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. My oncologist has given me 2 years at most. He's recommended chemotherapy and possibly surgery, but the estimated cost is between $200,000 and $300,000. I've chosen to refuse treatment. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Hartman raised her hand for silence. Stephen continued. I'm refusing treatment because the money I would need to pay for it is currently the only evidence in a criminal case. If I withdraw those funds, my son will know I discovered his theft. He'll destroy the remaining evidence and there will be no justice. So I'm choosing to die with the evidence intact. Jacob made a sound, half gasp, half sob. I didn't look at him. Couldn't. I want to be very clear about what's happened, Stephen said. In November 2017, I discovered that my son Jacob Michael Cooper had been stealing from me. Not small amounts, not a one-time mistake, systematic theft over years. He added his name to my accounts in 2016. By the time I found out, he'd taken nearly $800,000. The screen shifted to a spreadsheet. Stephen's handwriting. Columns of dates and amounts. I opened a certificate of deposit in April 2017. Stephen continued, using money from the sale of 2 properties I'd inherited from my mother. I deposited $2 million and instructed the bank that only I could access it. I never told my wife. I never told my son. I knew that if Jacob found out, he'd try to take it. His face hardened. In March 2020, he tried. 3 times in 2 weeks, he submitted forged power of attorney documents claiming I was incapacitated by dementia and couldn't manage my affairs. The bank flagged the signatures as fraudulent. Each time they called me. Each time I thanked them and told them not to involve law enforcement yet. Stephen leaned forward slightly. I need you to understand something. I've been pretending to have dementia since November 2017. I did it to protect the evidence. If my son thought I was losing my mind, he'd believe I couldn't track what he was doing. He'd get sloppy. He'd leave a trail. He reached off screen and lifted something into view. A small velvet box. This was my mother's engagement ring. My son sold it on eBay in June 2018 for $4,000. When I asked him about it, he told me I must have lost it, that my memory was going. That's when I knew how far he was willing to go. The camera zoomed slightly. Stephen's expression softened, but his voice stayed firm. To the jury, my son and his wife stole $1,850,000 from me over 8 years. They isolated me. They forged documents. They manipulated bank employees. They are guilty. He paused. His voice cracked just slightly. To my son. Stephen's voice trembled. Jacob, I loved you. I would have helped you if you'd asked. If you'd admitted you'd made mistakes. If you'd tried to make things right, I would have forgiven you. But you chose to steal from me while I was dying. You chose to let me die alone rather than risk me discovering the truth. I can't forgive that. Tears ran down his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. To my wife. His voice steadied. Nancy, by the time you see this, I'll be gone. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I knew you'd try to fix it. You'd try to forgive him because he's our son. But some things are beyond forgiveness. Use the money to help other people. Make sure Lily knows her grandfather was brave. And please, my love, live. The screen went dark. The courtroom was silent. Somewhere behind me, a woman was crying. Jacob had his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Karen sat perfectly still, whispering something to Austin Reed about filing an appeal. Judge Hartman's voice cut through the silence. The jury will now deliberate. They were out for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreperson, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, stood and read the verdict in a clear, unwavering voice. On count 1, elder financial abuse, guilty. On count 2, forgery, guilty. On count 3, conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. All 13 counts. Jacob collapsed forward onto the defense table. Maxwell Grant steadied him. Karen stared straight ahead, her face a mask. Judge Hartman scheduled sentencing for the following week. Sentencing day. Monday, May 23, 2025. Judge Eleanor Hartman had presided over federal cases for 20 years, but even she looked shaken as she read the terms aloud. Jacob Michael Cooper, you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $1,850,000 jointly and severally with your co-defendant. Jacob didn't move. Karen Lynn Cooper, you are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Same restitution order applies. Karen's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Hartman looked at me. Mrs. Cooper, I cannot imagine what you've endured. Your husband was a remarkable man. This court honors his courage. I nodded, unable to speak. As the marshals led Jacob and Karen away, Clarence Peaton appeared at my side. He pressed a cream-colored envelope into my hand. The words on the front in Stephen's handwriting for Nancy. Open only when it's over. The envelope sat on my kitchen table for 24 hours before I had the courage to open it. Cream-colored paper. Stephen's handwriting. For Nancy. Open only when it's over. I made coffee, sat down. The morning light from the window on Capitol Avenue fell across the table, the same way it had the day I found the certificate in the trash. That felt like a lifetime ago now. I opened the envelope. My dearest Nancy, if you're reading this, the trial is over. Jacob and Karen have been convicted, and you know the truth about everything I hid from you. I'm so sorry, my love. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry for pretending to lose my mind. I'm sorry for dying alone when all I wanted was to hold your hand one last time. But I couldn't tell you while I was alive. You would have tried to forgive him because he's our son. You would have found a way to excuse it, to explain it, to fix it. That's who you are. You see the best in people even when they don't deserve it. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with you 49 years ago. There are some betrayals that lie beyond forgiveness, Nancy. What Jacob did wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was calculated, deliberate, and sustained over years. He watched me pretend to lose my mind. He watched me grow sicker, and he kept stealing. I need you to understand why I chose this path. If I'd confronted him, he would have destroyed the evidence. If I'd told you, you would have confronted him, and the result would have been the same. The only way to ensure justice was to let him think he'd won right up until the moment he realized he hadn't. The money in the certificate is yours now. I have 3 wishes for it. First, take care of yourself. You've spent 46 years taking care of me. Now take care of you. Second, use the money to help others. I've spoken with Clarence about setting up a foundation to assist elderly victims of financial abuse. He has all the paperwork ready. There are so many people out there like me, alone, afraid, unsure who to trust. Help them. Third, take care of Lily. She's 8 years old and her parents are about to go to prison. She'll need someone to show her that love doesn't have to come with conditions, that family doesn't have to mean betrayal. Be that person for her, Nancy. Be her grandmother in the way Jacob never let you be. Tell Lily that her grandfather loved her from far away. Tell her she's the hope that grows after the pain. And tell her I asked you to teach her to play chess. She's smart like you. She'll love it. I have to go now, my love. Dr. Dixon says I have weeks, maybe days. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only afraid you'll be angry with me for keeping this secret. Please don't be angry. Everything I did for justice and for love. Yours always, Stephen. I sat there for a long time after I finished reading. The coffee went cold. The light shifted. And eventually I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, and called Clarence Piton. I want to set up the foundation, I said. Today, November 2025. 20,000. The custody hearing took place on a Tuesday morning in family court. Lily sat beside me, small and quiet, hands folded in her lap. She was wearing the navy blue dress we'd bought together at Macy's, her choice. The judge, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, reviewed the paperwork and asked Lily a few gentle questions. Did she feel safe with her grandmother? Did she want to stay with her? Lily nodded. Yes, ma'am? And do you understand that your parents won't be able to come home for a very long time? Yes, ma'am. The judge signed the order. Custody granted to Nancy Marie Cooper, grandmother, effective immediately. As we left the courthouse, Lily slipped her hand into mine. She didn't say anything, but she didn't have to. By December, Lily had moved into the apartment permanently. We'd turned Stephen's old sewing room into a bedroom, painted the walls lavender, bought a new bed, hung up posters of constellations and planets. Lily liked space. She liked things that were far away and impossible to reach. The Stephen Cooper Foundation officially launched December 15th, 2025. Clarence handled the legal filings. I handled the mission. David Bradford showed up 2 weeks later and asked if he could volunteer. I owe him, he said, standing in the tiny office we'd rented on J Street. I owe you. Let me help. By January, we'd helped 4 families. By March, we'd helped 12. The foundation provided free legal consultations, connected victims with financial crimes detectives, and offered emergency funds for people who'd lost everything to a relative's theft. David worked the intake line 3 days a week. He was good at it, patient, careful, deeply familiar with how predators operated. He knew because he'd been manipulated by one. Lily started therapy in January. Twice a week, she sat with a child psychologist named Dr. Patel and talked about her parents, her grandfather, and the night the police came. She still had nightmares sometimes. She still asked questions I didn't know how to answer, but she was getting better. Slowly. She smiled more. She laughed at cartoons. She brought home straight A's from her new school and taped them to the refrigerator herself. One evening in late November, nearly 6 months to the day after the sentencing, Lily looked up from her math homework and asked, "Grandma Nancy, was Grandpa Stephen really smart?" I nodded. "The smartest person I ever knew." "Smarter than you," I smiled. "Much smarter." Lily tilted her head, considering. "I wish I could have known him better." I reached into the drawer where I kept Stephen's letter. I'd read it so many times the creases were starting to wear thin. "Your grandpa left something for you," I said. "He asked me to tell you that he loved you even from far away. He said you're the hope that grows after the pain." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just nodded. "And he asked me to teach you something," I continued. How to play chess. Do you want to learn?" Lily looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen in months. "Yes," she said. "I want to learn." The first time Lily beat me at chess was on a Sunday afternoon in December, 8 months after Stephen died. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the one where I'd read his letter, the one where I'd found the certificate in the trash. Lily moved her queen into position, looked up at me with Stephen's eyes, and said, "Checkmate, Grandma." I heard my husband's laugh in the winter breeze coming through the open window. "Well done," I said, tipping over my king. "Your grandfather would be proud." Lily grinned. A real full smile that reached her eyes. 8 months ago, I wasn't sure I'd ever see her smile like that again. The foundation held a small gathering in mid-December. 8 months since Stephen died. 8 months since I found that certificate, and my world shattered. 40 people attended: Detective Campbell, Clarence, Peyton Russell, Jennings, David Bradford, and families we'd helped. Lily stood beside me as Clarence unveiled a plaque with Stephen's photograph and a single line. Lily had chosen the words. She'd found them in Stephen's notebook, underlined 3 times. "The truth is patient. It waits longer than any lie." After the gathering, Lily and I drove to East Lawn Memorial Park. The headstone was new, simple granite with Stephen's name, his dates, and the same line from the plaque. Lily knelt and placed a white chess queen on top of the stone. It was something we did every visit, a ritual she'd started without explanation. "Hi, Grandpa," Lily said softly. "I beat Grandma at chess today. She says you'd be proud." The wind rustled the bare oak branches overhead. "I'm doing okay. School's good. The foundation helped another family last week. Grandma says we're making a difference." She traced her finger over the engraved letters. "I miss you," she whispered. I knelt beside her and put my arm around her shoulders. We stayed like that for a while, the 2 of us under the oak tree in the winter cold. Jacob had written 3 letters from federal prison. They sat in a drawer, unopened. Someday when Lily was older, I'd let her decide whether to read them. For now, they waited. Karen's appeal had been denied. She had 13 more years to serve. Detective Campbell called every few months with updates on cases where the foundation had made a difference. "You're doing good work, Mrs. Cooper," he said during his last call. "Stephen would be damn proud." I thought about that often, whether he'd be proud, whether I was honoring his sacrifice or just trying to outrun my guilt. But then I'd see Lily laughing with David at the office, or I'd read a thank you letter from a family we'd helped, or I'd watch the sunset over Capitol Avenue. And I understood this was what Stephen meant. This was what living looked like. One evening in late December, Lily looked up from her homework. "Grandma, do you think my dad will ever say he's sorry?" I put down my book, a biography of Bobby Fischer that Lily had checked out for me from the library. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe, maybe not." "Do you think I should forgive him if he does?" I thought about Stephen's letter. There are some betrayals that lie beyond forgiveness. But I also thought about Lily, 9 years old, carrying a weight no child should carry. "I think forgiveness is something you get to decide for yourself," I said slowly. "Not me, not your grandfather. You, and whatever you decide, I'll support you." Lily nodded, then went back to her homework. Late that night, after Lily had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table where this had all begun. The certificate was long gone, transformed into the foundation, into Lily's future, into help for dozens of families. But Stephen's words were still there, echoing in the quiet. "The truth is patient. It waits longer than any lie." The truth had waited 8 years, hidden in a certificate tucked between old electric bills. It had survived Stephen's death, Jacob's theft, Karen's manipulation. It had waded through forged signatures and fake dementia and a dying man's sacrifice. And in the end, it had won. Not just in the courtroom. Not just in guilty verdicts and prison sentences. It had won in a 9-year-old girl learning to be brave. In a foundation helping hundreds. In a love that survived betrayal and death. I looked at the photograph of Stephen on the shelf. The one from our 40th anniversary where he was laughing his eyes bright with intelligence and mischief. "Thank you," I whispered, "for trusting me, for being patient, for teaching me that justice and love aren't opposites. They're the same thing seen from different angles." In the bedroom, Lily turned over in her sleep. Tomorrow morning, we'd play chess again. The foundation would open its doors. We'd keep building the life Stephen had given us. The truth had been patient, and now it was free.